Hi friends, it's Miss B again. I have another project for you to try today. This one probably will use a grown-up's help with a hot glue gun, so if you have a grown-up around, that would be recommended. And what we're going to be making today is a penny pot. I like keeping all of my loose change or even pennies that I find on the ground sometimes. And if you don't have a small bank already to keep them in, you can make yourself a penny pot, or this kind of container can also be good for putting in pencils, pens, scissors, things like that on your desk. It's real super easy to make. It's kind of Mosaic-like, but we're going to do a little bit of math with it today too. The things you need are pretty simple. You just need an empty, clean can. This is a green bean can from last night's supper, so wash it out real good. And if there's any sharp parts, then maybe your grown-up can help you with a pliers or something to press the sharp parts into the inside of the can. You need a bunch of pennies. How many? We'll talk about that in a minute. Something to measure with, so a ruler and probably a piece of string would be helpful. You always might need some scissors for something. And then if you have a hot glue gun, that is how we're going to be attaching the pennies to the cup. So if you can gather up those supplies, and we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, so I've got my glue gun over here to the side, and I've got it plugged in, so the glue is starting to melt. I do have an extra glue stick at the ready, because it'll probably take more than one stick. The first thing you need to do is go ahead and take the paper off of the can. Sometimes there's a little bit of glue left, but it's usually not very noticeable, but try to get as much of the paper off as you can. You can paint your can, spray paint your can ahead of time if you like, and with my practice paint pot I did spray paint part of it white just to kind of see how that would turn out, but it's not necessary. We'll just start with this shiny plain can and see how it goes. One of the questions is, well, how many pennies do I need to cover my container? Well, if you're going to use a small can from like food items, like my green bean can, you'll probably need about the same amount of pennies as I do. But if you have a different size container that you're covering, how do we figure out how many pennies we need? Well, it basically has to do with the area of the outside of the can that we're covering. Well, how do we measure that? With a ruler. So there's two dimensions that you need to know. One is how tall your container is, and this container is 4 1/4 inches. And the second measurement that we need to know is how much the circumference is around the can. So that's why I brought this red ribbon. If you start at one end and wrap it carefully around the container, the canister, the can, and you can cut off the extra right where the two meet each other. Get rid of the extra, and then take that piece and measure it on your ruler. Then you'll know exactly the dimensions around your can. So my can is 9 inches exactly around the circumference of the can, 9 inches. So 9 by about 4 inches. It's a little more than 4 inches, but 9 by 4. So if I'm using pennies to cover it, I can see that a penny measures not quite 1 inch. So probably for my can that's a little bit more than 4 inches tall, I probably will be able to get 5 pennies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 pennies on my ruler goes just about to the 4 inches, 4-inch mark, which is about the same height as my can. So that's how I can estimate. Since my can is 9 inches around, I would probably guess that I know that I could make at least 9 rows around, and probably 11 or 12 rows because my pennies are about 3/4 of an inch. So that's one way you can estimate for how many pennies you need for your project. But this isn't something you have to do all at one time. You can work on it a little bit at a time as you are saving up your pennies to cover your penny pot. There's also a really great children's book called The Penny Pot, and sometime when you're at the library or at your school, check that out and see what you can find. Now here's where the grown-ups can be helpful with the hot glue gun. The gun is very, very hot, especially here at the tip, so please do not touch the tip of the glue gun. But starting with one nice row of glue on your can, you make a line of glue on your can, and then take your pennies and carefully press them into the glue, leaving a little bit of space between them. You have to do this part quickly so the glue doesn't dry without having a penny attached to it. The hot glue that I'm using is actually made for jewelry, so it's good for sticking metal to metal. So when you're looking at what kind of glue to put in your glue gun, you want to consider the materials that you're using, and we're attaching metal to metal. For the next row of pennies, I just put another line of the hot glue close to the pennies I just put on, but not touching. And I can get 5 more pennies to attach. You can either put them in the same kind of a row, or you can offset them, kind of like bricks. I'm going to go ahead and put mine in the same pattern, not offset. What I mean by offset is you could put them in between, but I'm going to go ahead and keep my rows nice and even. Go ahead and put a 3rd row of glue. And I find it easier to do a whole row at once than just to try to put a dot of glue and a dot of glue and a dot of glue. You could experiment with having your pennies heads up or tails up. You could also see if you have shiny or new pennies or some of the older pennies, whichever look you prefer. You're going to keep on going all the way around the can. Putting the lines of glue and the rows of pennies. Be careful if you stick your finger in the glue because it is also hot. And you might even feel that the pennies are hot once you've touched them to the glue. That's because the metals that are in the penny are really good conductors of heat. See how that's coming along? I've got 6 rows completed so far of 5 pennies each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows completed. So far, how many pennies would that be? 5 times 6 equals 30 pennies. And I'm about halfway covered of my can. So if 6 rows will complete half of my can, then I can guess or estimate that 12 rows of pennies, 11 or 12 rows of pennies will complete my can. I'm going to keep going all the way back around, completing row by row, and I'll check in with you in a few minutes. Okay, so I've put the last pennies on, and my can is covered all the way around. Looking pretty great. So now let's figure out exactly how many pennies we were able to use for our can project. We know we have 5 pennies in a row, and let's see how many rows. We'll start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 rows of pennies times 5. So 12 times 5 is 60 pennies. That's 60 cents. So 60 cents, a can, an old recycle can, and some hot glue, and you can make yourself a nice little penny pot. We don't have to keep our pennies in this anymore. We keep them right in here. Or again, if you don't want to keep your change in it, you can always keep your pencils and art supplies and scissors in your Mosaic penny pot. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you have fun with this activity at home, and I'll see you next time.